It seems to work better.
All right. All right. I've been told to go very slowly on the first slide to give everyone a chance to come in. So basically what we're dealing with here is that we have a problem with inaccurate and out-of-date information in ARIN's Whois database, and that's presenting some real problems for those who are trying to address issues of abuse and illegal activity. In order to address those issues, you first need to figure out who to reach out to. But it's really problematic doing that and identifying the correct contact to reach out to if the point of contacts that are attached to the resources that you're looking into don't have meaningful information. You really need to have the correct contact, the right individual that is responsible for that space listed, and accurate information about how to get in touch with that individual. The problem is really being exacerbated by the activities of some upstream ISPs that are swapping reallocations to their customers and creating point of contacts for those reallocations that don't really have meaningful information in there. Sometimes they're just putting in any contact that they have at their customer's organization, but that might not be the correct person to reach out to. And the information contained in there might not really be that helpful to those that are seeking to address issues of abuse and illegal activity. Law enforcement officials need to be able to identify the ISP closest to the end user, and they need to be able to figure out who to reach out to at that organization in order to send legal requests. If this information isn't accurate, it slows down their investigation. They end up having to send out multiple requests, and it's also a problem for operators who end up wasting time and resources dealing with misdirected legal requests. A third note that everyone that holds resources should be concerned about is that if you don't have up-to-date records and they're listed in ARIN's database as being invalid or simply out of date, that does make you a more attractive target for those that are out there looking to hijack space as well. So how does current policy try and address this issue? Right now we have a Poc validation process where once a year emails are sent out to every Poc in the database and they are asked to validate that information. They have 60 days to respond, and if they don't respond during that time period, then the Poc is marked as non-responsive. After that, if ARIN staff determines that that Poc has been completely and permanently abandoned, or it's otherwise illegitimate, it will be marked as invalid. So basically this approach helps out a little bit because if you're in ARIN's database trying to figure out who to contact, it at least lets you know that the contact information there might not be that great. This policy attempts to take that a step further and actually incentivize improving the data that's in there rather than simply marking off what isn't good information. The previous draft of the policy we're working with here attempted to improve the validation process in two different ways. First, it sought to limit the scope of who are the participants in this annual validation process. So the previous process sends out the email validation requests to every Poc in the database. The previous version of this draft and the current version both limit the scope of that to the tech, admin, NOC, and abuse POCs, and only apply to organizations that have a direct assignment, a direct allocation, or a reallocation, so it leaves out reassignments. The other way that the previous draft sought to improve the issue was by adding in some teeth to really incentivize organizations to validate their POCs. The teeth that were added to the previous draft were a little bit controversial. So first the initial email was sent out, you get 60 days to reply. If you don't reply within 60 days, it gets marked as non-responsive. After that, there's an additional 90 days, and if you do not reply during that period, ARIN staff would investigate the POC, and if they determined that it was permanently abandoned or invalid, then they would remove the reverse DNS entries for the associated organization and remove the resources for that organization from ARIN's database. We presented this option at the last ARIN meeting, and the community's response was not positive, that they felt that this was a very extreme response that they weren't willing to move forward with. So our current draft seeks to scale that back a little bit. We're looking at a less extreme incentive, some less extreme teeth here. So instead of removing reverse DNS and removing the resources, instead organizations that do not have validated POCs after the validation process, those organizations will be unable to access their ARIN Online account except to validate their point of contacts. So we'd really like some feedback from the community about how to best address this issue and how to start improving the information that we have in the Whois database. So we'd like to hear from you guys about whether or not you think that removing access to ARIN Online is really going to help improve the situation. If it will help in a meaningful way. Will we just have people clicking through, yes, this information is valid, without actually going through and checking that the appropriate contact for the resources is listed? We'd also like feedback about whether or not there are some better options out there. Another alternative that we have discussed doing here is to try and incentivize the upstream ISPs to put in accurate and meaningful information in the first place for their customers when they're making these reallocations. So one idea about how to do that would be to require that all of the POCs that are attached to reallocations that are made also be validated before the upstream ISP itself is able to access its own organization's ARIN Online account. We understand that there are some organizations out there that have a very large number of reallocations, so it's possible to take a more phased approach to implementing a more extreme version of what we're proposing here, but we would really like some feedback from all of you about how do we solve this issue. We've been talking about it for a while, and we would like to hear from you guys about what you think would actually work for the community.
All right. So at this point, we invite those that would like to comment on this policy, either the specific text or just if this is even just a problem that the AC should continue, or the high-end principles. So as a reminder for those that are very new to the process, page 24 of your guide details the policy process in a nice diagram form, and this one is at stage 3. So it's not recommended at this point, but the AC is looking for that early feedback. So with that, I would urge people that would like to say they think this is a good idea, and you can say just that, a bad idea, or they have suggestions, to approach a microphone. We have about 10 minutes of comments. Please remember to identify your name and organization, and we'll start with the far microphone.
Hi, Christopher Regan, Bronx District Attorney's Office in New York. So I really support the proposition of trying to get more people involved with getting the POC accurate. I'm with law enforcement, and so we use this constantly, and we were talking in the law enforcement discussion panel yesterday about possibly law enforcement getting involved with helping keeping POCs up to date, and we're constantly looking for who we can contact, because we have to send out our subpoenas and legal compliance stuff to somebody, and we'll get it out eventually. So making some sort of form that we can submit points of contact that we use, so that if the information is invalid on that site, or on the Whois, that we can then add new places for things to go to. I was just speaking to someone who explained that if the email that ARIN's sending it out to doesn't exist anymore because the person has left the company or whatever, that it means that they don't receive any sort of follow-up email. It's just a bounce-back email and comes back as invalid. I think if the if there are suggestions either from other companies or from law enforcement saying that there is this other point of contact that we use, that may be a secondary place to look for points of contact.
Great, so you're supportive of the policy, you'd like to see ways to inject, and also though to inject potentially bad data to be reviewed and validated. Is that what, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, and thank you very much for bringing the feedback. It's great to get lots of stakeholders here. Middle microphone, please.
Rüdiger Volk, Deutsche Telekom. I don't have a real opinion on the specifics of the proposal. I would like to make a comment on the motivation text. It seems to me that the motivation text seems to promise things that currently are not really are promising tasks that are not in the design and purpose of the Whois, and I think never will be. To be very specific, and there may be other parts in the motivation text that are lower key like that. Promising the district attorney that he will be able to find in the Whois the directly connected service provider for an address is just not what can be done by Whois, and it is not what should be done by Whois. And doing that kind of promise to parties outside of the inner community here is not going to be serve the purpose of this community helping other communities.
Okay, so if I understood that, it wasn't so much a concern with the text, but you would like to see the problem statement refined to more accurately reflect the scope and purpose of the Whois, which is an interesting point, because I believe that's a question that's plagued the community for some time that we haven't, I don't believe, did we ever, John, formalize on that? Because there was many attempts to.
On the problem statement or the purpose of Whois?
Purpose and scope of Whois.
No, we do not have a formal statement or agreement among, we have lots of usages of it, we have lots of good reasons for it. I don't think we have a problem statement for what Whois is.
So I would urge the speaker, of course, to approach the shepherds if they have specific text suggestions as well, so that could be refined. This microphone now, please.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. So the funny thing for me is what we're trying to achieve, I agree with. The problem statement, I agree with Rüdiger, is wrong. We are trying to, from what I can gather from this, improve direct allocations and reallocations, so the direct ISP assignments. And that benefits everyone in the community and should just be looked at as a benefit to everyone in the community. So I'm actually very supportive of this because previous policies went way down rabbit holes in lots of areas, but this is actually dealing with the direct who's using this space or who's responsible for the space, not using it, but responsible. So I would actually suggest cleaning up the problem statement to be just that. This is for the benefit of everyone in the community for many reasons, and it's good for everybody. In regards to the ARIN Online question you have on there and a bunch of other things, I don't believe staff and legal has been done. I didn't see that in the thing. My concern is what can be done. I don't like knocking down ARIN Online because right now it's used for billing as well, and who knows what it will be used for next year. There's a bunch of things, and I don't even know if it could be done if we're playing with something that's part of the RSA side of the world versus the NPRM side of the world and all of that. So one of my concerns with the policy is when I'm reading it, we're being asked to make choices, but I don't know if we're going to go down long discussions and find out that those choices were in fact not possible because of contractual obligations or whatever else the case may be. So just a suggestion that having that looked at first before the community really goes into the specifics of the text itself and how it works would definitely be beneficial.
So, Kevin, I know you're familiar with this, but since you've raised it as the first point of the day, just as a bit of how the policies flow, is this is just a draft policy, a staff impact and legal analysis has not been requested, because that would typically be done as it enters that stage, which those questions would then be posted first to the advisory council, and then if it came forward to the community, so that would be answered. But yes, I understand that you're kind of saying maybe perhaps on this one it informed. But just so that people understand, that is a step that must be passed for this proposal to keep going. I think John and then Amy wanted to, or Amy and John.
It's a valid concern, Kevin. At a high level, we have some 37,000 entities that have resources in the ARIN registry, and 20,000 of them are contracted parties under RSA or LRSA. For parties that are under contract, there's no issue of enforcement of policy. For the legacy holders who are not under contract, which is a diminishing pool because a lot of these resources come in and quickly end up being transferred and end up under contract. But for the legacy resources, it is possible that any policy that's implemented, when we go to review what can be done for enforcement of policy, we might have to do a balance with the community. So you need to some extent, as it says, when you get to recommended, we will do a staff and a legal assessment. That is a rigorous assessment about implications of the implementation. But you have to presume that we can proceed and enforce any policy that the community wants. I highly recommend the community take great care in considering policies to make sure that you like a policy as much inflicted on you as you inflict on others. So when you're writing policies, please consider that you might be the subject of them at some point.
Amy.
And one thing that perhaps Leslie might want to speak to is that the current text is really just looking to codify the most recent ARIN practices where when you go to log into your ARIN online account, if you do not have a validated tech or admin POC, it prompts you to do that in order to log into your account. That might be helpful for your...
Absolutely. Just to answer to John, I know that the AC, the Advisory Council, can, at its discretion, request a staff and legal anytime during a draft process. It is done when they believe things are ready. I am suggesting that having gone through a Whois cleanup 8 or 9 or 10 times over the years, that throwing new concepts here that might be not possible might be a good idea to start that a little earlier, even if it's lighter touch in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Just as a time management, so we can have some understanding, if you are planning on speaking, if you could try and approach Mike in the near future, or if you're remote participating, start typing. I'd appreciate, just so we have a handle on roughly how much more we'll have. Fire microphone.
Thank you. My name is Iranga Kahangamam with the FBI, and we're in support of this policy. I think, as some of the others have mentioned, Whois cleanup and Whois accuracy has been an issue for a large time, and I think as us coming to this community and seeking to kind of be a consistent partner with this community, I think this is a really good first step. I think for the technical people, you should realize that law enforcement does realize that this is a bit of an unwieldy beast for the Whois and the database, and I think breaking it off into very small bite-sized pieces is a really good way to start and foster this relationship. So for that reason, in addition to some of the positive aspects that would come of it, we're in support of it. And we're very knowledgeable that you guys have the better technological insight, and so we're happy and I was willing to work with you to kind of alter language or specificity, knowing that we aren't here to negatively impact any of your business practices or anything like that in a burdensome way, but we are in support of the policy. Thanks.
Thank you for the input in favor. Middle microphone.
Owen DeLong, Akamai, ARIN AC. I'm actually strongly opposed to the policy as it currently stands. As the IP administrator for an organization that has a large number of reassignments that we are responsible for, the recipient of a large number of reassignments, often the only way we find out that a bad POC has been put on one of our reassignments is that annual POC validation process, where we suddenly find out that some random person in Akamai who happened to fill out a contract somewhere once upon a time with an ISP is somehow on a POC that this ISP created. So I'm not opposed to what the policy is attempting to achieve. I am opposed to the removal of reassignments from the POC validation process. Second, the ARIN Online account thing is problematic in a number of ways, not the least of which is that it seems to assume some sort of one-to-one correlation between ARIN Online accounts and org IDs. And no such one-to-one correlation exists. And in fact, it can be both one-to-many in that a single organization can have many ARIN Online accounts tied to it, and many-to-one in that a single ARIN Online account can have many organizations that it is tied to. And so when you talk about if an organization doesn't have any valid POCs, you're going to take away their ARIN Online account. It makes me wonder, does that mean if one of the organizations on my ARIN Online account somehow mismanages their POCs without me noticing, is that going to interrupt my ability to manage all of the other organizations that are managed through my ARIN Online account as well? And this would be very problematic in a number of ways.
Why don't we pause there? Just I know you have many because so the text says organizations lacking a valid POC will lose access to their ARIN Online account until a tech or admin POC has been validated. Was the intent that it would be just the organization lose access or anything associated?
Well, the problem is organizations don't have ARIN Online
No,
accounts.
I
People do.
understand that. That's what I mean. Would it be the ARIN Online account for anybody associated with that organization is disabled, or that organization disappears from ARIN Online accounts? Was there an intent, or?
I don't think that that was a scenario that we thought through. It could be just that you are prompted when you log into your ARIN Online account, if one of your organizations is lacking a valid tech or admin POC, you would be prompted to validate that before being able to engage in further activity on ARIN Online.
Right, but if one of my accounts that I do stuff for has this problem and I'm trying to go manage something for another entity, I don't want to have to clean up their problem before I can solve my other entity's problem.
Okay, John is looking like he needs to.
So the proposed. Aye. The proposed problem text says, policy text says, organizations lacking a valid tech or admin POC will lose access to their ARIN Online account until a tech or admin POC has been validated. Now, that is a particularly nonsensical statement in one regard, because it's talking about organizations losing their ARIN Online account, which they don't have. But it's also, the intent is semantically valid, amazingly, which is an organization needs to have valid POCs in order to be managed via ARIN Online. Organizations not associated with any valid POCs will not be managed by anyone until this is corrected. So I think the phrasing is particularly interesting, but it still has the same effect, if you see what I'm saying.
So
because an organization that has no POC affected with it, which is what it says, an organization with no valid POC is not able to be managed.
So I think Kevin Bloomberg's got an early staff assessment, since that's staff, and he's assessing the text as we speak. So there's probably some need for clarification there. So I think that sounds like something that needs to be clarified. Going back, did you have some more points, or because?
Nope, that was it. Thank
So
you.
you are against the policy?
I'm against
as
the policy because of the removal of reassignments.
But the problem statement,
Well, the problem statement is kind of ludicrous, as Rudiger suggested, but whatever, it doesn't matter after we make it a policy.
Okay, we'll take that input. Thank you.
John O'Brien, University of Pennsylvania. A couple of comments that I think will be brief. To the second question on this slide, will the validation that occurs be meaningful? I would propose that it is meaningful because any validation shows that there is an active point of contact that is presumably receiving the prompts to go validate. So to me, there's a sort of a bright line between something that shows activity and something that doesn't show activity. Perhaps not as meaningful as we might like, but meaningful nonetheless. The second point is that, and partly in response to Owen's points, if we consider this not just access to ARIN Online, but the privilege to perform management functions through the ARIN Online with respect to the affected organization, it might help to achieve that clarity that we're looking for. Essentially, you've got to validate in order to do the thing you want to do. So that's my input.
Thank you. So we are getting a little close to the end of time, so if you do want to speak, I'd like to try and let everyone have a chance to speak, but I do need you to approach a microphone very rapidly so that we can make sure there's time, but I will be closing the microphones very shortly. We're going to go to remote participation next. Chris, if you could, if you have as many as you may have.
Yes. Oops. Thank you
So
very
keep
much.
holding. You
It
gotta
only
hold it
seems to be active when I'm pushing it down actively.
Yes, it's a
So
push and
anyway.
hold, unfortunately.
Yeah. So Marla Azinger of Frontier Communications says, I support what staff is doing by prompting Poc validations when you log into ARIN online. I had them do it to me once recently, and it was great. Made it easy.
Thank you for that remote input. Okay, we are going to close the microphones and remote input after this next speaker, far microphone.
Bruce Roberts with the Main Tools. I'd like to second the gentleman from Akamai in that I support the intent of the policy, but not the dropping of the reassignment validations.
Okay, thank you for that. Center microphone.
Jason Schiller, Google, ASOAC. I support the policy as written. The previous versions of this had issues with the removal of data from Whois and the removal of resources. That's been fixed. Thank you. I'd also like to point out that this discussion about incentivizing the upstream ISP to do the right thing and have their reallocations and reassignments accurate is not actually part of the text as written, which is why I support it as written. I don't support this new twist of penalizing the upstream ISP if their records are inaccurate. I also do, and I echo the same concerns that I think it was Rudiger and Kevin Bloomberg brought up for reasons for that. I also am concerned about when someone picks a random contact to swip addresses to when you don't know about it. I also have been victim of this and have only found out because I had a reassignment for a point-to-point, for example, swipped to a random contact at my company who reached out to me and said, why do they think I am the authority for these resources? So please do keep sending those emails. You might want to not have it be part of the rest of the process of marking invalid and whatnot. I also agree with Owen's concerns about locking of only a single org. I manage multiple orgs, and if one of them is without valid contacts, I should only be prevented from doing useful transactions for that org that doesn't have valid contacts. With the exception of maybe billing, I think it's probably worthwhile for someone to be able to continue to pay their bill even if their contacts are not up to date. So as written, I support it. With the twist of penalizing upstreams, I think that's a bad idea. There's also one other idea that was floated on PPML quite a bit to deal with this issue of randomly assigning a contact for reassignments. And that is, if you're making a reassignment to a POC that's not one that's linked to your account, they have to approve it or authorize it or acknowledge it. That would be even better than what we have today, waiting for the annual email to come out and find these things that have been randomly assigned to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, for that input. So the microphones are officially closed. That microphone there, and then we'll finish off here unless a remote has snuck in. Please go ahead, sir.
Good morning. My name is Jason Plumpin with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and we're the national law enforcement agency from Canada, and the 9 Canadians that are in the room. Obviously, I support this this motion kind of as it's written. However, we are willing to massage it however we can to help the community accept it a little bit more. To put it into perspective, the National Child Exploitation Coordination Centre in Canada had 27,000 referrals last year for child exploitation related. So these are children that are at risk. And we use the Whois to determine where the jurisdiction is to start that investigation, to try to either bring someone to court or to save a child. So this is why it's important to us. It's not, we're not trying to ram anything down anybody's throat. We're just looking for help in order to do our jobs a little bit better. And so that's just a little bit perspective. I mean, Canada's only we only have 30 million people, and we have 27,000 referrals last year. So it's a big problem that we're trying to get a hold of, and that's why we've come to the ARIN community to try to get that support, to try to help. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, and we'll finish off here.
Carmen Alvarez, DEA. We support the POC validation. I think it's very important not only for us to have correct and accurate information, but also for the organizations to post information that they have and that is accurate. We also want to be part of this community. We've been coming to these events for years now, and we want to participate. We feel that we can add something to this, that we can actually be proactive and help out. And we also believe that we actually get information from you that is very useful for us. So I think this should be an open conversation between law enforcement and the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, the microphones are closed. Unless Amy, any final comments? So let's thank Amy for the presentation. My thanks again for also the law enforcement that was able to come to the meeting. It's great to hear that stakeholder input. It really helps that when you can be here with the community to hear the concerns and the practical. There's no show of hands on this, as it is just a draft policy, but I would urge you, if you do have feedback you'd like to give to the advisory council who'll be meeting later this week, either grab the Shepherds, Amy Potter or Alyssa Moore, or any of your friendly local advisory council members, and please give them input, even if it's just to say you're supportive or not. With that, I'll turn it back to John for the next one.